adjust it, you should be good to go.
Perfect. Thanks, Rick. So yeah, my name is Taylor, and I have been coming to Refresh now since October of last year, so almost a full year. I've been with Addison Group since January of 2016, so coming up on 2 years now, and that was my first foray into recruiting. Before that, I was a student recruiter. Wasn't anything like this. It was a good time, but this is definitely far more challenging and a lot more rewarding. I want this to be pretty interactive, so if you have questions, I know there's a couple of you guys watching online, feel free to ask questions. And I also want to put a disclaimer out there. This is, of course, my personal opinion as a recruiter. I know there's a lot of other firms in Oklahoma City, so I don't want this to be like I'm speaking for everybody. Chances are that myself or a member of my team has probably left you a voicemail or sent you an email or connected with you on LinkedIn because of your skill set. So I also want to put out there that I'm well aware that we try to get in touch pretty often. Want to introduce you a little bit about Addison Group if you're unfamiliar. We have 18 offices across the United States and 6 core industry sectors. So that can be anything from administrative to IT, which is what my focus is. On the West Coast, we have CV Partners. That's an acquisition we made out there, and then we also acquired Hire Strategy on at the East Coast. Then we also have a consulting partner out of Seattle, Denver, and Minneapolis, which is AIM Consulting. So I want to first ask how many of you guys have ever worked with a recruiter to find the next step in your career, talked to your recruiter before? I think a couple of you guys in this room are recruiters, so you guys are pretty well aware of the industry. I want to start a little bit about my title. So I do not consider myself a headhunter, and I've always just not really liked the connotation of that word. Couldn't figure out why, so I Googled it the other day. The second definition of headhunter is member of society that collects the heads of their dead enemies as trophies. So I think I figured out why I didn't like the word. My style, I don't consider the candidates or the clients that I work with as trophies. I consider them partners. So that is one reason that I do not consider myself a headhunter. I prefer the term IT search consultant. I'm here to be a career advisor, perhaps a resume writer, an interview coach, basically whichever hat you need me to wear to find that next position for you. So moving on, in case you're not terribly familiar with recruiting or the terminology that comes along with it, there's a couple different phrases you may have heard. So there's going to be a couple different types of positions that we will fill for clients. So there's going to be full-time, so that could be contract to hire or direct hire, and then project-based, which is more consulting or straight contract work. The differences in these: a straight contract has an end date. At the end of that project, one of 3 things could happen. You may be asked to stay on because, surprise, the work wasn't finished in the time they thought it could be. Or maybe they love you so much and they want to offer you a full-time position. Or it just ends and you move on to your next project. Full-time work, you are going to become that company's full-time employee one way or another. At Addison Group, we actually work on all 3 types, and I think that's true for most recruiting firms. We split it up a little bit here at Addison, where a portion of our team focuses just on direct hire and just on direct hire, and the other portion focuses on contract to hire and contract. We do that so that we can put a little bit more emphasis on the positions that we're working on and make sure we are giving those candidates our full attention. So I wanted to kind of open up the floor for some comments or questions. What are some myths, rumors, etc., that you have heard about recruiters? They don't last? Like there's a lot of turnover in the industry overall? Awesome. What else?
Like a big paycheck.
Okay, got it. Anything else? Cameron, Lori, would you like to add? Okay, perfect. I like that. I think there's a lot of myths and rumors floating out. Oh. Got some extra people joining. Love it. Welcome. Hi. Good, how are you? So I want to address one of the myths that I actually didn't write up here, Joe, but I really like it, the one that they don't last. I think there is a lot of people in this industry that don't last. It's very true. I think you can come into recruiting and you don't have the stamina or the perseverance or what it takes to actually get connected with your clients and your candidates and be here for the long haul. And I think that can sometimes really give a lot of recruiters a bad name because they feel like they're being passed around from person to person and they're not getting any type of follow-up, which we'll actually get into here in a little bit. So I think one of the legends that I thought personally before I even knew what recruiting was or got into this industry is that a recruiter is going to cost me something. So they're going to cost me money. I don't believe this. This is too good to be true. How could someone actually want to help me find a job and not ask for something in return? Now, the truth of that is that recruiters will not ever cost you a dime if they're reputable recruiters. If you're paying money for your job search, please stop. I can't speak for all recruiting firms, of course, but the reputable ones out there, they're not going to charge you for their services. Yes, question? Oh, we'll get into that one too. I probably won't leave you alone though. So before, like I said, before I knew what Addison Group or what they did, I wasn't quite sure how this could be a free service. But recruiting firms do not cost you a dime. They're not going to cost you any portion of your salary. None of that is ever going to come out of your pocket. If they are working with a client, they have a budget that they will pay that firm, and you will never see that come out of your paycheck. So I think that's one thing I want to make sure everyone's aware of, because if you haven't worked with a recruiter before, you might not know that. Second myth I want to get into is recruiters don't follow up with me, or maybe as Rick said, they follow up too much. I think that absolutely there are some recruiters out there that have probably dropped the ball with you. I'm not saying I'm a perfect person. I can't stand up here and say I have always called everybody back. But I do know that if you have met with me and you have told me what your job search and your parameters are, I'm going to call you when I have that position. I really don't want to badger you or waste your time or call you just to chat about the weather. Generally, you're at work, I'm at work. I'd rather do things that are going to be a good use of my time. So when I do call, it's because I have that position that you said was going to be a perfect next step for you. If I'm not calling, I probably don't have that position yet. Now, I will say this, I really appreciate it when a candidate does assume some of that responsibility of follow-up. If you're really active in your search, you needed a new job 3 weeks ago, then please call me. Never a problem for me. Call me, send me emails, leave me voicemails. I want to hear from you. And the last thing I would say is that I personally set a calendar reminder to follow up with any candidates that are in front of a job with me every single Friday. I'm sure there's probably few things more frustrating than hearing from a recruiter about this awesome job. You're excited, you love the company, could be a great raise for you, and I have said, great, I'm going to send your resume over there, and then you hear crickets for 3 weeks. That probably has got to be the most frustrating thing in the world. So my promise to you, and what we try to do at Addison Group in general, is to follow up every week. Now that follow-up call may be, hey, Mr. Candidate, thanks for your time this afternoon. Here's the update. The manager's still out of town. I won't know anything for another week, but I want to make sure you know that before you go into your weekend. Or maybe it's, hey, they've actually selected a couple of people for some interviews. You weren't selected yet, but they still want to consider you next round, so sit tight. Or the feedback could be negative and just say, listen, they didn't want to select you for an interview. Here's the feedback that we got. I think more candidates have actually thanked me for the negative feedback than even the positive feedback, because it's actually something to work with. So that's one thing I wanted to debunk. So the next one is recruiters can help me switch careers. I get a couple of phone calls from people who aren't even in IT, and they say, listen, I really want to be a software developer. And I'm like, great, what's your background? Well, I've been teaching English for 10 years. Like, okay. I'm not going to be your best resource. I think there's people out there who have the idea that a recruiter is magic. We're a genie in a bottle. We can do anything. But the truth is that we may be able to help you with a slight career shift. Say, for example, you've been developing in C#.net and you're just really loving PHP and MySQL. We can maybe help with that. But more often than not, our clients are coming to us for help because they need to find an expert in a certain field, and they're going to be unlikely to really use our services if we're not going to find them an expert. So keep that in mind if that's what your goal is in your career, is to find a shift. A recruiter may not be the best resource for your job search. Next myth I want to talk about is recruiters don't want to help me get a raise, which I actually was surprised, Rick, that you said that recruiters can help me get a ton of money. Why? Can you elaborate on why you say that?
Not personally.
Okay.
But I've had stories told to me
Okay.
about CTO positions that have come up in companies. And it was supposed to be like $150,000 a year paying job. Big money.
Yeah.
And he gets there, goes through the interview process, gets his offer sheet, and it's only $65,000 a year.
Ah.
The recruiter was like, oh, no, that's wrong, you'll get back to it. And he, for some odd reason, signed the offer sheet
Oh.
and started working there. 6 months later, he's still there
At the same salary.
at the same salary.
Now, was that an increase from his previous salary? Do you know?
No.
Wow, that's interesting. Okay.
Right around
I don't think I would have taken that offer. Yeah. Okay, so I appreciate you elaborating on that. So I think the myth I hear the most is that you don't want to help me get a raise. And that is 100% not the case, because I definitely want you to get that rock star raise that you want. I try to understand your total compensation package and figure out what's going to be that perfect next step for you, because it doesn't do me any good to not get you the salary or compensation that you want. It's going to give you a bad taste about that company. You're probably going to not like me very much, and you might leave that company in 6 months, and my client's unhappy, you're unhappy. Nobody won in that scenario. So my number one thing when I first talk to an individual about making a job search is, why are you looking right now? As a direct hire consultant, I work a lot with individuals who are in roles. They're full-time, they're pretty happy in what they're doing. Maybe they have a really crappy commute and they're driving 60 minutes one way, so they say, listen, if you find a job 5 miles from my house, call me. Otherwise, I've got the perfect scenario right here. But I would say probably 80% of the time I talk to people who are unhappy in their current jobs because they don't feel like they are adequately compensated. And that's something that my number one advice to you is, go have a conversation with your manager. Hopefully you have a manager where you have an open door policy, and maybe if you don't, that could be a reason that you're looking. But 9 times out of 10, if a manager knows that you're unhappy, they're going to want to keep you there. And we're going to get into the market a little bit here in a couple of slides. But people do not want to lose good developers, especially in this tight market. There are far more jobs open than there are people to fill them. So if you have made it clear that I don't feel like I'm being compensated for the job that I'm doing, they may go ahead and give you that raise, and you can save yourself interviewing time, you can save yourself the trouble of having to get feedback on interviews, and just get the raise that you wanted in the first place. So if that's the reason that you're looking, that's one thing I consider you talking about first. Otherwise, you could get to a counteroffer stage. And I don't know if anyone's done research on counteroffers in here. Anyone know much about counteroffers? Thoughts? No, crickets. Okay, well, let me just inform you guys. So counteroffers are becoming super prevalent because of how tight the market is right now. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a backstory. We recently worked with a candidate who was looking for a new job. He has a family and wanted to get a little bit of a raise and just find a better situation for himself. Found him that position. We got him an offer. He accepted. He put his 2 weeks notice in with his current employer. They came with a counteroffer. I don't remember the exact numbers. I think it was maybe 5,000 more. My first question for that candidate is always, where was this 5,000 6 months ago when you were unhappy? That's my first thing that I want you to think about as a candidate, is why did they not already give this to me? Now, if you hadn't asked for it, then okay, that's probably why. But if you have already told them about this and they suddenly come up with this 5,000, that would make me a little bit wary if I was in your shoes. So he ended up taking the counter, which I was excited that he got that money for his family. I understood that's what he needed to do. We get a call from him, I think it was 2 weeks ago. He was part of a layoff. He had taken that counter offer, I think it was not even a month ago. And when budget cuts came around, they already knew he had a foot out the door. He was the one that wasn't invested. He was the guy that got let go. So that's one thing to keep in mind. It doesn't always happen like that. I've heard scenarios where it's great, they're still there 10 years later. That's going to be the minority for sure. So keep that in mind as the counter offers come around. Excuse me. Moving on a little bit about this raise scenario. So our goal is to always, as a market, get you a 10% increase. That's generally what you will get when you move positions. Now, if I can get you more, I'm gonna go for it. That's a better scenario for you. You're gonna like me better. I'm gonna like me better. So I always say to go for it if we can. We actually recently worked with a candidate who was making $45,000 in her role, and we knew that this company was targeting $60,000. So that's already a pretty big increase. I'm not a math geek, but significantly more than 10%. And she went out to the interview, killed it. They offered her $75,000. So a client is going to see your value. If you go out there and kill the interview, they're going to see that value. But I'm always going to target as much as I possibly can for you. So keep that in mind as you work with a recruiter, that they do have your best interests in mind, because it's their best interest too. Next thing I want to talk about is probably the thing I hear the most is, I'm happy in my current role. I really don't need a recruiter. Thanks so much for your email. Thanks for your call. Let me ask you this. I think probably everybody in this room has a doctor, you have a dentist, you might even have a chiropractor. You usually get these people lined up before you even need them. When I first moved to Oklahoma about 6 years ago, I had a doctor I could call if I started feeling sick. I had a dentist if I needed to get my teeth cleaned, but I didn't necessarily go talk to them right away. Think of your recruiter and talking with your recruiter as a checkup like that. Have coffee with them once a year. Let them know what's happening in your career. Maybe you've worked on some really cool projects. You haven't really actively updated your resume, but you want them to know what you're working on. Maybe you got a raise, so now instead of needing $90,000 to leave, you might need $100,000 to leave. Keep them up to date with what's going on, and they're going to do the same for you about the market. They're going to tell you what's happening. They're going to make sure that you are keeping your fingers on the pulse of the market as well. This is a chance for you to share your career goals. Maybe you thought you were going to have a chance to move into management, and now it's not going to happen. So this is your chance to talk about, hey, if you see a team lead role, that's what I want. So think of your recruiter as someone that you just have in your back pocket, not someone you have to talk to every week or even every month, but someone you talk to once or twice a year, because they could find that next perfect spot for you. So next thing I want to talk about is that logic of why you need a recruiter in this market. So the overall unemployment rate in in the United States right now is 4.4%. That's according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Now technical unemployment, so that's all technical jobs overall nationally, is 2.5%. And then I jumped onto DICE just to see what was going on over there, and between 1% and 2% unemployment when it comes to programmers and software developers. So that's a lot of people in this room, the people watching. Unemployment rate is incredibly low. So what that means for you is that this is a candidate-driven market. This is the market that you want right now. This is where you have the power. You are able to honestly be really picky about what you do next, which is exciting. And you have more choices, you have more options. I can tell you right now, thinking about the open positions we have currently, there's 10 on the board, and there's probably four different candidates are in front of all 10, because that's how tight the market is right now. I want to be pretty upfront about transparency. So transparency is really important when you're working with the recruiters. So we can help speed that interview process along. We can help talk to the client, let them know what's going on in your search. If you have 10 offers coming in, I want to be able to get you that 11th one. You know, that's the type of thing I can do for you. We had a gentleman that was part of a layoff a week and a half ago, so last Monday. We heard from him on Monday, and by Wednesday, we had 3 interviews lined up for him, with another one this past Monday. He had an offer Thursday evening and another offer on Monday, and because I knew he had these offers coming in and he was being transparent with me about the rest of his search, I was able to get him other offers to compare. So that's one thing that we do as far as providing value for you, because we have that direct line of communication with the manager. We can tell them, listen, this candidate that you interviewed a week ago is not going to be on the market anymore. If you like them, you need to move now. So that's one thing that really works in your favor when you work with a recruiter. I also want to keep in mind that a lot of times recruiters can work on roles that are not posted. So if you saw a job on Indeed or Dice and went and applied, chances are 30 other people probably applied to the same job, and that job's getting filtered through HR, probably filtered through a keyword search, and then maybe if you have the right keywords, your resume is going to end up on the desk of the hiring manager. We skip all those steps, and we go straight to the hiring manager. They're telling us directly what they want. You're going to hear directly from me what they want, what their feedback is on you, and they may not even post their job. If it's a confidential search, they're replacing a member of their team, they're not posting that on Dice. They're not posting that on Indeed. So that's another thing to keep in mind working with a recruiter. They can inform you of jobs that you may not have known were out there otherwise. They can also target companies for you. So I've had candidates come to me and say, I would really love to work at this big oil and gas giant or this really small mom and pop shop I've heard great things about, but they don't know how to get in. Perhaps we have connections that we can get them in there. We've created jobs for people like that before. So keep that in mind as part of that arsenal of what a recruiter can do for you. They're essentially just another person going to bat for you. We actually had a gentleman, we sent 2 resumes to one of our clients just a couple days ago. And candidate A, candidate B, they really liked candidate A. Yes, we want to interview him. Candidate B, they had some questions on his resume. I don't know, I think we're going to pass. We decided to address the questions, and they decided, okay, all right, we'll talk to him. So we kind of talked him into interviewing them. Candidate B was their pick. They would have missed out, he would have missed out if we hadn't actually said, listen, let's address these questions, let's figure out what you feel like is missing from his resume. He got an offer within an hour of that interview. So a lot of times that one person going to bat for you can help you get that next job. I want to close by just saying that to me, recruiting is about relationship building. I don't want to necessarily meet you and place you tomorrow. I would like to maybe place you in a year, keep in touch with you. You might actually end up being a hiring manager, and I want to be able to help staff your team. I network with Oklahoma City candidates to get an idea of this market pulse. I'm not a software developer. I can't stand up here and say I know how to build websites, although I'm learning some tricks from coming here every week, but I'm nowhere near ready. But I am passionate about this industry just as much as you are, because this is my career too. And so I know that my job and my career is important to me, and so that's why I'm going to take good care of your job and your career, because this is what that is. If you feel like recruiters aren't valuable, then you may not have found the right recruiter yet. So really try a couple out, see who you like, and find one that you feel like you can build a long-term relationship with to help you in the future. So I appreciate that. I want to open it up to a couple questions if there are any. And then, of course, my contact information is up there if you ever want to get in touch. Yes. Okay, yeah. Okay, so can you say that one more time? Oh, good. I love questions. They express that they believe a recruiter might make a bad match. Okay. Okay, so they believe that a recruiter might make a poor match, bad match for the company or the recruiter, or the candidate, just to keep moving people through a pipeline. I'm sure that's happened. I can't stand up here and say that you may not have been a victim of that. I think this goes back to transparency, is when I'm working with a candidate and they have told me what they want and don't want in an organization or a position, if I call them about a job and it's not what they want, then I always say, please tell me no. I'm not going to stand up here and say, you have to say yes to this job. You have to say yes to this interview. I want you to really make a good decision for yourself. So if you feel like you can't tell your recruiter no, then you probably haven't found that right recruiter either. Because I want this to be a relationship where you tell me when I'm wrong so that I can be right next time. I would hope that the people that you're working with to put you in a job, that you can be honest with them and you can tell them, you know what, I don't want to accept this offer, and they're not going to push you into it. I know there's scenarios out there where that's happened before, or where you felt like that before. So I, first of all, apologize if that's ever happened to you. But definitely don't be afraid to push back and say no and say this isn't right for me, and here's why. Because your recruiter does want to find that next match. And honestly, if it's not a good match, that you're not going to be happy there, you're probably about to leave here. Maybe you've only been there 6 months. You're about to leave. The client's going to be really unhappy that you're leaving. They're going to blame us for you leaving. You're going to blame me for placing you. So we try to never make matches like that, but I'm sure it's happened before. So I think the number one thing is for you to really open up to your recruiter and tell them no. Other questions? Yeah. Okay. Love it. Okay, so they are working, so I think the question is, how do you work with one recruiter when there's a team of 10 at the agency? Am I understanding that question correctly? But really, with like 10 people. Gotcha. Okay, understood. Thank you, Lori, for clarifying. Okay, so you feel like you're just working with an entire firm and it's not personalized to you. There's 7 other people who are calling you. I say that, first of all, I think that goes back to just keeping communication up. If there's one person that you've really liked working with from that recruiting firm, just email them. And don't be afraid to say, hey, I have a really good relationship with Taylor. Thanks for calling me, Lori, but I'd really like it if Taylor could give me a call about this, something like that. There's no harm in saying that. We would prefer you work with someone that you enjoy working with. I will say that, especially in firms where there's a focus on contract and then there's a focus on direct hire, you may hear from 2 different people, but I would hope that you wouldn't hear from more than that. Generally, it works in your favor that there's 10 people looking out for you, but I can get how that would be a little bit confusing, frustrating, and kind of get some mixed signals. So I, again, would just speak up and say, I've actually had a great experience working with Taylor. I'd like to work with her. Or perhaps see, hey, is something going on? You guys had a lot of turnover. I feel like I've talked to 8 different people. Ask questions about it, for sure. We don't mind answering questions like that. And then and then it's just inconsistent. Okay. Well, I see how that happens. I looked up in our list the other day to see how many people are in just our database overall, and there was over 18,000. So I can see how it could become easy to feel like a number, and I think a lot of that goes back to being proactive and keeping up with your recruiter. So if you've just made a job change and you're just like, hey, let me just let you know what's happened recently, shoot me a quick email. Hey, I'm not interested in jobs, but I wanted to let you know this. That way I don't get 4 jobs behind, and so you haven't heard from someone since 2008, and I call you in 2015, you're like, I haven't worked at Northrop Grumman for 6 years. Where have you been? So be proactive in your job changes as well. Hope that helps with the question. Anything else? Yes.
I've got 3.
Oh, okay.
Okay, what about having different versions of your resume for different jobs?
Yes. Yes is the answer to that. Whenever I meet with a candidate, I'll usually offer some resume tips. A lot of times you guys are pretty dang good at writing resumes, but sometimes there's a couple things I'll offer suggestions on. And I always want to tell you to tailor your resume to the job. Now, I'm not saying you're going to lie about the skills you have or anything like that, but especially if you're applying to a job online, I kind of touched on this before, they're 9 times out of 10 going to run your resume through a keyword search. So if you have these skills that are on the job description, but you just didn't put them on your resume because you're like, well, I'll talk about them in the interview. You might not even get a chance to get to that interview if you haven't taken the time to write that down on your resume. So kind of be nitpicky about what you've worked on. I think this is a myth I probably could have included, that my resume is too long, it's more than a page. Oh my goodness, nobody cares anymore, I promise you. Please have your resume be more than 1 page. I know you're selling yourself short if your resume is only 1 page long. So I think when in doubt, add more information than you think is necessary, because that's that manager's first impression of you. Now, I may be able to get to say a couple of words on your behalf when I talk to the manager if you're working with the recruiter, but otherwise, it's just your resume getting sent, and you want to make sure it's that perfect first impression of you. Any other questions? Yes.
Also in regards to resumes, how much do recruiters change your resume before they submit it?
I don't change any content on your resume ever. I don't think any other recruiter generally does either. I take what you've sent to me and I format it to where it has the Addison Group header, your skills section, your experience, your education. That's it. I may reformat, but I will never type anything else on there.
And my final question is, what candidates do wrong what are candidates doing wrong when working with recruiters? No jobs are coming through. Where is the disconnect?
Okay, what are candidates doing wrong when working with recruiters? If no jobs are coming through, where's the disconnect? So this could go back to a couple of things. First thing could be that what you've asked for, I'm not seeing. So sometimes I may meet with candidates who are super happy in their jobs. All they want is this great pay raise, and maybe the clients I'm working with aren't willing to pay that right now. And I generally will call someone and tell them that and just say, hey, listen, I just haven't seen that in your current salary requirements. I'm still looking, just wanted to let you know. So hopefully they won't be waiting by the phone for me at that point, and just know that, yes, I'll call when I have that. It could also go back to perhaps that what you're looking for is just not out there right now. Now, if there's been a couple jobs that you've been talked to about and you just haven't heard, then that could go back to a feedback scenario, and you need to get with your recruiter and ask, hey, what's going on? Can we set up some type of expectation for feedback? I'd like for you to just give me an update every 2 weeks or every week, whatever you are most comfortable with. So that way you're not in the dark all the time. Hope that helps. Any other questions? Yeah. And then see. Okay, great question. So how far along in your career should you be when you find a recruiter? So I think most of the recruiting firms in this town go to almost all the career fairs. I've been to a couple this year, but we suggest talking with the recruiter from that first time that you're coming out of school. Now, we may not get you that first job, but we're gonna know what you're looking for that next step in your career. I feel like probably a lot of graduates, myself included, I stayed in my first job for a year. So I wasn't really trying to build up tenure. I just wanted to get something on my resume and then find that next step, which I think is true of a lot of students. So go ahead and get connected with the recruiter now. It's gonna save you time later, because they're gonna already know what your background's like, what your ideal career goals are, and from that, this transition to your next role should be pretty seamless. They can also kind of help you have an inside scoop of what's happening in the market. They may know about positions maybe that they can't work on, but they know that there's a great internship opportunity at this company. Go online and check it out. I can't submit you there, but you might be able to get connected that way. Even if you're not coming out of school, we can still help at an entry level. I've actually placed an entry level guy back in May. He was actually in technical sales for, oh gosh, like 10 years. And he started teaching himself. He started attending free code camp. He was going to a lot of these user groups, built up a portfolio, and we placed him in his first development job in June. So I know here I am promising I can't give you a career shift, but if you are putting in that work and teaching yourself, then you should get a recruiter to help you get your foot in the door there. Anything else? Yes.
This will be the last thing, and I'll be quiet.
Okay.
Do you give, what's the best way to say this without sounding stupid, clothing advice to applicants before they go? Because I've been on an interview where I've always been kind of instructed to be professional attire. When I got there, it was far from that. They were in shorts, t-shirts, one guy was in a Hawaiian shirt, flip-flops. I mean, do you gear them for that? I mean, I understand we're going for a job and you look professional.
Sure.
But if you show up in a suit and tie and they're not a suit and tie kind of company, doesn't that kind of send the wrong image? Do you, as a recruiter, say anything about that?
Yes. So the question is, what do you potentially tell people about how to dress for an interview? Do you prepare them if it's not business professional, et cetera? So 9 times out of 10, you're going to want to dress business professional no matter what. And I'm going to tell you that because even if that company is a shorts and flip-flops environment, you want to go ahead and show them that, hey, I can put on a suit and talk to some executives if you need me to. However, we have a couple of clients that are like specifically tell us, hey, don't show up in a suit. If they show up in a suit, we're going to send them home. Please, have them wear some nice jeans and a polo. That's as fancy as we get. So I do prepare my candidates for that. I'll let them know, hey, this guy likes ties, he hates the color blue, don't wear blue. I will literally get into the nitty-gritty of what they're expecting you to show up looking like. But I would always say, if you're ever in doubt and you don't have a recruiter to tell you what to dress like, just wear the suit, and if you show up and they're in shorts, let them know, hey, I can change if you need me to, that type of thing. Great question. Yeah. Great addition, Lori. Any other questions? Awesome. Well, thank you guys for the opportunity. It was awesome. I know we had a couple of people missing because they thought they would melt, but I'm glad you guys made it, and thanks, Rick, for asking me. Appreciate it.